last time we kind of covered how to embed media into a form into a website, and in this particular video we'll be discussing how to create forms in your HTML, right? So if we look at our code right now, so we have covered so far how to create headings, create lists, style your different texts. We have covered how to create tables, how to embed the media, and now we will create a section and I'll call it forms. So I'm just commenting that out. Now if I go to using forms on our roadmap, so how to create your first form, right? So we'll try to understand like what a typical form is. So if like a web form typically looks, something like something like this, right? Something that you um, or actually yeah, something like this. You kind of have fields where you can enter your names, you can enter your emails, you can write a message and all of that, right? So how to do that in HTML for our particular website, right? So uh, in order to do this, first what I'll do is create a new design. So basically we'll have an idea of what we want to create, and then we'll go and start creating it. Like the first step in any form is you design that form. You should clearly know, okay, like what are the things that a user would be trying to input to get to a certain goal, or what do you need from the user so that you can add some value to their life. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll first design this entire form experience. So let's create our form. So for example, we are going to say uh, uh, what animals do you find cool, right? Let's say that's the form that we want to create, right? I'll put this in the center, and now from the user you will need basically you will need something like a name, right? And you will need their email, right? Right? And you kind of need uh, animal name, right? You will need a better description on why they love this animal, and um, let's say you need uh, a set of options here on what is that one thing about the animal they like most, right? And they should be only able to choose one, right? So I'm going to write here that user can only choose one. This is a condition, right? Now You also need something, let's say uh, uh, what where do you visit this animal, sorry, this animal, right? And they could be visiting this animal at multiple places, right? So we should be able to give them an option like this: you visit this animal at the zoo, they visit this animal in a park, they visit this, they have this animal at home as a pet, um, or they have just seen the pictures online and they find this animal really cool, right? They should be able to, select multiple things, right? So we will write user can choose multiple, right? What else? And then of course there should be a submit button to all of this, and we'll call this submit, right? So if we look at our form, this is how the form looks like, right? Sorry. So this is how our form looks like, right? So we will try to replicate this form on our HTML code. So how do you start with it, right? So we have gone through the first phase, which is we have explicitly designed our form. Now how to do this is we'll start with a form element, right? So we'll give it a form element. I hope you can see my screen. So we are going to say form, right? Now if we go back, so there's an action attribute and a method attribute. What are these? So the action attribute defines the location URL where the form's collected data should be sent when it is submitted. So it defines the location where the user will where the form will send the information once they put in. And the second is the method attribute defines the HTTP method to send the data, usually get or post, right? So if you don't remember, in our starting videos we kind of discussed something called HTTP, right? So if we go back, so you see this, right? So information is being sent from one IP address to the other, and the router is sending this information. In order to send this information, the information is being packaged as a HTTP request, right? When you have to get some information from the server, you call the get method, and when you have to post or send some information to the server, you give the post method, right? So when you're sending some information from a user who is using the web page and giving it to the server, you will typically use a post method, right? So we will go back to our documentation, and as you can see, there's an action which tells the location that for my handling form page, the information will be sent to the my handling form page, and method will be post, right? So we will, let's say, call it form action is equal to rabbit form submissions, and since this is a location, we'll give it a slash, right? And we will give it a method of post. I hope this is in yeah, sorry, this has to be in, I'm assuming this has to be like this, yeah. So now once this is done, you go to the input and text area elements, which define what things yeah, will be inside the form itself. So I'll just check if in the roadmap it's a separate thing? Yes, it's a separate thing. So right now we have learned how to create forms. I'll go to labels and inputs, and we'll start creating the form first. So if I go to the label element, what is this label element? The label element represents a caption for an item in a user interface. So it is not the user interface in particular, it is a caption related to that mm, form item. So for instance, our first thing in the form was a name, right? So we have to label that text input area as name, right? So we'll do that. Let's go and see by the documentation. We know that this is supposed to be label and this has to have name, right? And we are saying there is a for attribute here. What does that mean, right? So the value of is the ID of the labelable form control in the same document associating with the label with that form control. So if you can see, there is a input tag also, which is saying that the input is a type of a checkbox and name is equal to cheese, ID is equal to cheese. So the for attribute, according to the documentation, should contain the ID of the form control. So if you see this input tag, so it has a ID of cheese, right? And the label is saying for the ID cheese, I am the label, right? So for instance, we want to create an input, right? I'll not write anything here, but I'll just write the ID is equal to user name, right? So if the ID is username, so the for class in the label should also have username, right? Now if we have done this, right, so how do we give a text box here for user to put in his name, right? That's where the input tag comes. So if I go to the input tag, so you will see that you have to define a type, you have to give it a ID, you have to give it a name, and there are some other attributes to it as well. But if you have to put in a text box like this, right, so you have to give it a type text. So let's say ID is equal to username, we'll give it a type as text, and we'll also give it a name is equal to username. I'll give it a different we'll give it an underscore just for differentiation, right? And yeah, that should work, right? So I'll copy the path, and I'll go to that page. So if I go below, yeah, we have our form. And just to maintain the fact that we are, you know, maintaining some spacing, I will say I'll put it under a div, right? So now within our form area, um, I'll also give it a heading. H2. What was our heading? Our heading is what animals do you find cool? What animals do you find cool? Right. So once that is done, let's check our web page. Yeah. What animals do you find cool? The first thing is name, right? Now, what was the next item in our um, list? We had a email, right? So I am going to type in another label for equals email, I'll call it user email, right? And we'll put in an input whose ID will be the same as the for attribute in the label. Type equals, is there a type for an email? Yes, there is. And name equals user email. So just for FYI, I don't think so you are not supposed to write anything within the type attribute. If you go to the documentation, I think there will be an email field. Yes. So this document covers what you can do with the input type. So you can put type as button, you can put the type as checkbox, colors, dates. So if you put in color, you can kind of start a color picker. So the user can open it and select any kind of color. If you put in date, the user has to put in a date, right? If you put an email, you will have a field for editing an email address. Looks like a text input but has validation parameters and relevant keyword in support browsers and devices with dynamic keyboards, right? You can put in file to upload something, right? A control that is not displayed but whose value is submitted. You can hide something by putting hidden, right? So right now for our form, since we have a name and an email, I'll put that. Next thing was what animal do they like, right? So label for equals, we'll just, what animal do you find cool, do you like, um, and then we'll put in an input again, put id equals animal name, type is equal to text, and name equals animal name, right? So now that is done. Now we need a y, label for equals y, and close it. Why do you find them cool? And I'll put an input again, id equals y, which should be equal to the for attribute and the label. Type is equal to, if I have to put in a descriptive area like a bigger text box, what is the field for it? So if I scroll down, there should be one that has a bigger area, right? Line breaks, hidden, email, date. I need a bigger text area. So how do I start something? So I'm not able to find it in the documentation, which means time to Google. How do I add a description input in my form in HTML? Multi-line description. So text area, you have to put in a text area tag instead of your regular input, right? Or if you want a single line description, you can give it a size and a placeholder. Okay, so let's try the text area tag, right? So as you can see, the process is simple. You just need to kind of Google things out if you are stuck somewhere, and there's enough people on the internet who have faced the same problems that you are going through, and you can expect to have some solution, and all it requires is some effort to search these things. So learning is not a uh, in my opinion, it's not a hard and set process where you should remember everything, should know everything. It should be about, figuring things out by doing the research. And that's where, your active problem solving skills should show up. So that's what I'm trying to do with my learning process as well. If I'm stuck somewhere and I can't find the answers, let's just call it a day and Google it, right? So text area, it says, okay, it has an ending tag. Enter a description of the product as a placeholder. So let's try this, right? So instead of input, we'll call it text area, id equals y. Did I make some mistake? What's happening? Tag must be paired. Okay, text area, yeah, right. So I'm not giving it a placeholder yet. I am just going to test things out as they are. Now, what else was there in our form? We need some radio buttons. What is that one thing about the animal they like most, right? So I'm going to use label for what, and I'm saying what is the one thing that you like most about this animal. And then if I have to create a radio button, how do I do that? So if I go here, yeah, there's a radio. A radio button allows a single value to be selected. So if there are multiple options, you can only select one of them. So I'm going to do that. Input id equals what, name is equals to actually first type is equal to radio, and name is equals to what thing, right? And once that is done, so we have our radio button, but how do I give the option? So if I have to give an option, is there a documentation here? So let's click on this. So you say a radio, type radio, and you give it a value, and oh, you have to give labels here. Okay, so I was slightly off since there are three options, right? Let's call it, let's do one thing. Let's say we put in a div here and we say what one thing, right? And within this div we will put in h4 and we'll say what is that one thing you really like about this animal, right? And then we start putting in our labels, right? But actually first we will give it a radio button, right? So input what, so I'll call it a style, type radio, and is there a name in this? No, there's a there is a name in this, so we'll say name is style, and there's a value to it, we'll call it style. And once that is done, we'll put in the label, and the for should have the same ID as this, right? And within the label it should be associated to style, right? So now we are saying that there is a first there's a section of what one thing that you like the most, which has a heading that is what is the one thing that you like most about this animal. Then there will be choices which have input id equals style. So you either like style or uh, you like humor in them. They have a sense of humor. And we'll change all the values here, right? And then we'll paste one more option, which is you like their calmness, right? Now the for will be equal to this, and then we'll have calmness as a label, right? So we have defined this particular section as well, right? We'll just see if there is something that we should have done. So we can technically put it inside a field set and then put each of these particular inputs inside a div and then showcase it, right? But I'll try to do it this way and then see if I have done something wrong here, right? I'll say what one thing actually, this what one thing, we'll put it inside of a id and we'll call this as a class of radio options, right? So we know that within the radio option section, this is uh, the thing that we are trying to do, right? What else is in our form? We want a multiple choice option. Where do you visit this animal, right? So now we want checkboxes. So I'll just go and check if the structure is any different compared to a radio, because I have a feeling that will not be the case. The case will be that you just need to change radio to something like checkbox. Yeah, so I'll just go to checkbox. Yeah, it almost looks the same, right? So we'll do that. So let's say I go back and I'll just copy my div of radio options, and I'll put it here. I'll call it checkbox options, and we'll call it where visit, and we'll give it a heading, where do you visit this animal often, right? Now instead of, we'll call it let's say the first option is park, and this is a checkbox. The name will be park, the value will be park, right? And this has to match the id, and the text should be park.